And I'll start the meeting in our traditional way by ringing a club bell. I'd like to start this particular meeting with a minute's silence in memory of our past president, Nick Tarsh, who died last Monday. So if I could start with the request, if you like, for a minute's silence. Thank you. Thank you for observing that silence so absolutely. I'd now like to hand over to our almoner, Harry Simmons, for his observations on our past president, the late Nick Tarsh. Over to you, Harry.
Thank you, President. Fellow Rotarians and guests, it's my honour and great privilege to say just a few words about Nick Tarsh. And incidentally, the funeral is on the Wednesday, the 19th of May, and it will be online on Zoom. And I believe that the club will be sending out details. It's oversubscribed from the point of view of attendance. Similarly, there are evening prayers on the Thursday, the 20th of May at 7 o'clock. So those of you who want to go on Zoom and be able to watch those, the details will be published. Nick Tarsh, OBE, he earned this honor for his charity work. He was sponsored by Sir Sigmund Sternberg, who was a very well-known member of our club, and he was inducted on the 16th of February 1983. For many years, he was a trustee of our charity trust, and I think he really only gave this up because of his ill health. And he was club president in 1990. He was a regular attender, and once again, it was ill health that prevented him from continuing to be a very good attender of the club. In his young days, he played rugby. He met his wife, Helen, in the 50s. They have 4 children, great 8 grandchildren, and he was married for 61 years. And he had a great love of theatre and music. And I remember, and 1 or 2 of you may also remember, he actually arranged a soiree in his house on Richmond Green. The money went to charity, and he made a wonderful dinner, and there were singers and music, and it was a most wonderful occasion. His other work involved, in fact, he actually started with the Richmond Donkey Derby in the late 60s, and he raised money for charity, and that grew to donkey races in Old Deer Park, and went to providing 60 homes for the charity shelter, which gave homes to the homeless. So it's just amazing how out of small things grow. I think one of his major achievements was becoming chairman of Relate, which not only dealt with marital difficulties, but all sorts of relationship difficulties. So there's a lot to be said about Nick. A lot of his work went into helping third world countries. He developed the charity's income from less than £1,000 to more than £100,000 a year. As his son said, he was very good at bringing people together, and was a great leader. And I think we will all miss him very much indeed. Thank you, President.
Thank you very much indeed for those words, Amna Harry. I'd now like to welcome you all to the meeting, and in particular to welcome our visitors. I have already heard mention and seen on chat reference to Freedom Monday, and I am wondering whether that is affecting those people who'd rather go out to lunch than stay in on Zoom. Clive, could I ask you if there are visitors that we are seeing for the first time, at least in recent years? Thank you.
Yes, indeed, President David. Everybody, all our visitors are welcome, but in particular today, for the first time, we're delighted to welcome Martin Russell, who is the Deputy Lieutenant for the London Borough of Barnet, and who Brian Coleman has invited here. And thank you, Brian, for doing that. And we're delighted to see Martin.
Would you like to say hello? Martin?
I'd be delighted to say hello, fellow Rotarians. As a proud honorary Rotarian in Barnet, it's a pleasure to be with you. And thank you for your hospitality. I'm sorry it isn't over one of the elaborate lunches that I anticipate you have in London. Philippa, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say with great interest. President, thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, yes, that's it, President David. We don't have any joining us for the first time, but as I've said, all our visitors are most welcome.
Thank you. I'm pleased to see Evan Hickman, well, his name on the screen. And I just note that Nick Tarsh did a lot of work and was very involved with the Salvation Army, effectively establishing a drop-in point in Victoria Street. I wonder what became of that. I'd now like to move on to notices. I'd like people to remember that on the 29th of May, we have the Leonardo da Vinci Virtual Award Ceremony. It's coming closer, and you'll get another reminder next week. But this is a peculiar way in which we are celebrating the Leonardo da Vinci this year. We've deferred the meeting twice. And now, if you want to know who is the winner of the Leonardo da Vinci Award for, I think it's probably for 2020, then please keep that time available. I'd now like to ask if there are any council chairmen who'd like to make any comments or reports. I'd like us to note that there will be an extraordinary general meeting on the 14th of June, at which our reviewed constitution will be considered. That will be the main business of the event. And so on the 14th of June, which it might still be a gap in some of your diaries, it is for an extraordinary general meeting of the club. On to more celebratory matters, birthdays. I've already noticed somebody whose birthday is celebrated very shortly is on screen. Christopher Claxton, would you like to say hello to us? Lisa, I thought I saw you earlier, Christopher.
Yes, he is here. Christopher is here. He's muted at the moment, obviously. But Christopher is here.
Okay.
I can confirm that.
Okay. I don't see Emily Delamy on the screen, our new member. I don't see Emily, but we then have Lord Hunt. I don't see Lord Hunt on the screen either.
No,
his birthday is on the 21st of May. We have Olivia Au. I see Olivia. Olivia, say hello. It's your birthday on the 24th of May. And on the 25th, Other Kite, which is going a little bit forward. Olivia, are you there to say hello? Anyway, a happy birthday to all those present whose birthdays we can celebrate today. I've run out of digital pens to send to people, and I hope that we can actually continue to give pens to people when we're once again meeting at the Chesterfield Hotel. Visits to other clubs. Any visits to other clubs to report?
No,
Okay.
no.
Release from lockdown. We have this policy constantly under review, and our first effort is to hold a meeting on the 24th of June, which will be experimental. It's going to be a new members lunch, so focused on new members. And for those that can make it, the Chesterfield has offered us a special deal, 50% reduction on food. So Candy and Clive are taking bookings at the moment for people who would like to make that first lunch out of lockdown, assuming that things don't get amended on the 14th of June when the government reviews its policy. Right, I will rapidly move on to the first toast of our luncheon, our virtual luncheon, which of course is to the Queen.
The Queen.
So raise a glass and toast the Queen.
The Queen.
I'd now like to call on Brigadier Tim Waugh, our member, to introduce our speaker. Over to you, Tim.
President David and fellow Rotarians, it gives me great pleasure today to welcome our speaker, Commandant Philippa Lorimer, MBE, who from 2017 has been the commanding officer of the First Aid Nursing Yeomanry, the Princess Royal's Volunteer Corps, known as FANNY. Now, FANNY is a British independent all-female registered charity formed in 1907 and active in both nursing and intelligence work during the World Wars. Although the Corps is on the Army list and its members wear a military-style uniform and use the Army rank structure, it is not part of the regular Army or Army Reserve. Members of the All-Officer Corps do not train at Sandhurst, nor do they hold a commission. Philippa herself was a commissioned officer in the Royal Signals and served for 6 years and was involved in operations in Namibia and the Gulf War in 1990. She then went to work in defence industry. She has 3 sons in their 20s and is training her Cocker Spaniel, I understand. So Philippa, your talk is on Undaunted, deploying all-female rapid response teams. We look forward to your talk. Over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. I gather I've got 20 minutes. I think what I'll do is I'll just have a quick introduction, talk a bit about the history, and then come on to how the Corps was today, because that sets the scene nicely. I'm really passionate about this organisation, so it's a real honour to be able to share it with you. As Tim said, the First Aid Nursing Yeomanry, brackets Princess Royal Volunteer Corps. An awful mouthful, really, which is why for over 100 years we've been called by the first letter of the first 4 words, F-A-N-Y, or Fanny. And today that word brings many smiles, especially to the younger members of the audience or to people I talk to. But there is no way anyone in the Corps is going to change the name because of the history. And it has the advantage that if I'm really boring and you all start to go into half sleep mode, that at least you'll remember the name of the organisation tomorrow morning. And it is a really, truly unique organisation. It's quirky, it's quasi-military, yet we have this incredible association with the armed forces. We are an independent charity. We have to fundraise to keep it going. I'm not quite sure how we're still here. We are all female, but I'm so glad we are, because behind the scenes, they do a tremendous amount of work for London and the nation as a whole. I'm going to take you back, Tim's mentioned it slightly, but I think I'm going to take you back to it being founded in 1907 by a man, which is already remarkable considering it's an all-female organisation. And Captain Edward Baker was injured in one of the battles of the Boer War. And as he lay there bleeding very, very badly, he thought, what I need now is Florence Nightingale to gallop out on a horse and administer first aid. Well, Florence Nightingale didn't come, but he did survive. And he got back to England and he kept thinking about this. And although it was a slightly frivolous fantasy of this woman on horseback, it's rooted in very sound logic, because today, you know, we try to get our combat medics right up early on when someone's injured, and it saves countless lives. So anyway, in 1907, he put out an advert in the home counties in London for women who owned their own horse, and who weren't working, who were prepared to learn about first aid and be the next group of women who would help in the next war. And to his surprise, he got a lot of takers. And so he formed this group. He tied in the organisation with the Guards at Pirbright. So many of their summer camps were done in Pirbright alongside the Guards. He then, for some reason that we don't really know, petered away. He stepped out of it, and the organisation was run by a formidable woman called Lillian Franklin. And they carried on training, and it became obvious very quickly that despite the idea of horse-drawn ambulances, motorised vehicles were coming into the scene, and the next war was going to be about vehicles. So undeterred, they bought some vehicles. They were quite wealthy women, and they converted them to ambulances, and they carried on training. And when the First World War was announced, they marched up to Whitehall, banged on the door and said, "We're here, deploy us." And they were laughed at. And they were said, "Go away, there's no way that we are going to send, the government is going to send women to the front line." And they were livid. And one of them knew the defense minister in Belgium. And so contact was made, and they said, "Well, if you really want to come, we can't pay you anything, but we can house you, feed you. Come, we're desperate for ambulance drivers." So on the 27th of October, 1914, the first 6 fannies set off with 2 ambulances to Calais. And within 3 hours, they were bringing French and Belgian troops off the front line back to hospitals. Within a week, they were asked to set up another hospital. They called for reinforcements, and the rest is history. In all, there were about 390 women out there. They did have some nurses in the hospitals, but they also just had auxiliaries. They were helpers. They were paramedics in these ambulances. A few of them helped in canteens. And I think possibly my favourite bit of all was that they bought a lorry in England and they converted it into a bath unit for hot water. And they could bath 40 men an hour. For 10 hours, they could get through a battalion, keeping these guys clean as they came out on R&R from the trenches. And it was called James. So James is pretty famous. And I think by the end of the war, they'd won. I mean, they were incredibly brave. And I think they won 27 Croix de Guerre and many other Belgium awards for bravery, a couple of Légion d'honneur. They won 16 military medals and 11 mention in dispatches. And about 1916, the British Army decided they were missing out. So we also worked for the British. So they came back from the First World War with a lot of military friends. All the other female organisations were disbanded, but nobody could disband the fannies. They weren't even paid by the British government. So they carried on, and the War Cabinet decided to house them. So provided them accommodation and some training. They helped in the general strike, and they set about formalising this charity. So they wrote a constitution, and they made the aim of it that the Corps would support civil and military authorities in times of crisis. And that remains our object today. By the Second World War, the Whitehall came to them and they were asked to expand. And over the Second World War, they expanded to 6,000 women, 4,000 of whom were in the ATS, the Auxiliary Territorial Service. And the only difference is that they have fanny on their arm and a different cap badge. And they did officer training and non-commissioned officer training and driver training. And they taught Her Majesty the Queen to drive her ambulance. So she was a member of the Corps. And you see some wonderful pictures of her with her ambulance. And the other 2,000 people were part of the Special Operations Executive, the SOE. So they were decoders, wireless operators, personal staff officers, drivers, administrators. They run some of the agents' houses and training centers. And 39 of them were female agents that jumped into occupied France. Of that 39, 12 were executed in concentration camps, and all of them were incredibly brave. In my office, I sit under 3 replica George Crosses for Noor Inayat Khan, Odette Hallows, and Violette Zarbon. If you don't know their stories, they are really worth reading about. So, huge amount of history, an illustrious past. What do we do today? Well, today we are much smaller. We've shrunk back to a whole corps of about 500, and we have a maximum at any one time of 150 active members of the corps. At the moment, it's about 130. We're London-based. We do deploy nationally, but you have to live or work in London. We are all female volunteers between 21 years old and 65 years old. They come from all different backgrounds, all different professions. They are all bright, intelligent women. It's an officer corps. And they are all security cleared. They sign the Official Secrets Act, and they never get paid for anything they do. They train throughout the year in a number of areas. So they train as, well, in military skills. So they do first aid, navigation, communication skills, and living in the field. They train as police national call handlers and assessing messages, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And they train to be personal staff officers who can be given in an emergency to key decision makers, and they will act as an independent log scribe so that those logs can be taken to inquests or inquiries at a later date. They've got to have some fun, so we try and develop leadership. We do quite a lot of leadership training. We do adventurous training, so you can hill walk and sail, ride, ski, and if you're very fit and slightly crazy, you can get your French military parachute wings as a thank you for the females that jumped in as agents. So 22 of the Corps have been given their French military parachute wings. And so that's the training, and that goes on all year. And then to build rapport with the people who we are going to deploy to support in an emergency, we do some routine support. And that is in the military reserves and regular units, and also to the police. We act as casualties sometimes, as opposition forces, as civilian populations, the members of the press, diplomats, hostages, whatever's needed to build the rapport and make an exercise more lifelike. You'll see we do a lot with cadets and some businesses, and then within the city, you'll see us at all sorts of events. We have a big contingent, including people on horseback in the Lord Mayor's Show. We march at the Cenotaph. We help at International Women's Day. A lot of city events and livery events, you'll see members of the Corps there. We wear combats. The military still houses, and we wear normal military combats when we're supporting them. And at other times, we wear our own service dress. And because we're a charity, we recycle it. So if you have to be very skinny to fit in the Second World War uniforms, and I'm not. But if you are very skinny, you get issued a Second World War uniform, which is a different color to some of the later service dresses and a modern army service dress. So the word uniform, when it comes to our service dress, is slightly a misnomer, because actually we never match. And so if you see us at one of these events, you'll see that the uniforms are all different. And in fact, many of them are signed by old members of the Corps, like the belts assigned by the agents who jumped in before they left. So there's huge historical significance with the uniform. Before I come on to very quickly talk about the operational side of it, I think it's worth going back to the police handling, call handling. This is actually quite a serious role. It doesn't sound very much, but it takes a lot of training to become a police national call handler. They have to keep it up twice a year, going through the training. And what happens is in the centre of London, in the City of London's police's area, is a call centre for 15, it's called the Casualty Bureau. It has 15 lines coming to it. And that is, in a crisis, is entirely manned by members of the Corps. We have a call out system. And when I'm asked to deploy, we normally man it within 20 minutes, 24 hours a day. Quite remarkable. People walk out of offices, out of their flats at night, and they open it up. And what comes in there is anything. It could be somebody calling to say they've just witnessed an explosion and they think their loved one is there. And then they could call back and say, actually, I'm on social media and I can see my loved one lying in a pool of blood. So some of the calls are very distressing. Some are about witnesses, some about offers for help. We normally do it for 72 hours, but sometimes we go on for longer. So we rotate the shifts every 8 hours through day and night. And then as the calls die down, we start matching families to hospitals and where patients are. So with that in mind, since I took over in 2017, I'm going to just run through some of the deployments, and then, you know, hopefully we'll have time for you to ask some questions afterwards. But in 2017, it was busy. It was a busy year. The first incident was the Westminster Bridge terrorist attack, and we were deployed to the Casualty Bureau. The second was the London Bridge attack, and again, we deployed. The third was the Manchester Arena, when you think, well, hang on, you're in London. But because we've become so good at this, we are the National Mutual Aid Casualty Bureau. You know, our women could be a lawyer, a teacher, they're highly professional people, they're totally committed to it, and they always turn up. Sometimes people use 6 staff to man casualty bureaus around the country, or people, and they just don't turn up. They don't think it's worth it. We're not paid, so we only do it for the love of it. So we really have become very proficient, and the Manchester Arena calls were horrendous. We then deployed to help the Ministry of Defence when soldiers went out on the street on op tempora as staff officers. And then we were heavily involved in the Grenfell Tower fire, or the aftermath of it, not only with the Casualty Bureau, and we were there for much longer than normal because of the problems with languages. Everybody spoke different languages and we had to use a lot of interpreters, and that slowed the whole thing down. We helped provide staff officers to the Gold Command, and we helped the Westminster coroner for 3 weeks because her team was really struggling. In 2018, thankfully it was a quieter year, we opened up the casualty once for a fraud involving footballers where members of the public were needed to ring in. And we helped the Economic Crime Division for a short time. And a London coroner who, funnily enough, his office was struggling because of winter flu. They had such a surge in deaths, which sort of leads on nicely to some of the work we've done more recently. In 2019, again, it was really busy. We deployed to military headquarters and the Cabinet Office for the first Brexit. We had lots of help, gave lots of help to the Economic Crime Division for fraud cases, and it went on for 3 months, helping get rid of some of their backlog of fraud cases. People who'd lost their life savings hadn't even had a phone call back from the police. So we were busy there. Then we helped open the Casualty Bureau for Essex Police with that awful incident with the Vietnamese who died in the lorry. And then again for the Fishmongers Hall terrorist incident. And we were more involved there because we took a team in to help their staff on the first regroup, because we have some trauma managers. So we actually helped with their staff. And then we come to 2020 and a pandemic, and our role has changed significantly in whom we've supported. So the first call came from the National Emergency Trust, which was after Grenville Tower. The Charities Commission wanted one central fund rather than lots of different funds, and they couldn't keep tabs on it. So the National Emergency Trust set up, and this was their first appeal, and we helped them in all sorts of ways. Within 2 days, we were asked to deploy to the Nightingale up at the Excel, and we went in to begin with just helping build a hospital in any way we could. But in the end, by providing staff officers to the directors and by setting up something called the FSLT, the Family Support Liaison Team, which was really crucial because everybody coming into that hospital was on a ventilator. They were unconscious. Their families didn't even know they were being moved there in some cases. So we had to call the families, explain they'd arrived safely, explain they had a team looking after them. But also for the doctors and nurses, they knew nothing about these patients, except, for instance, they were called Philippa Lorimer. So the families could feed back that they had 3 children. They liked football, or supported Chelsea or classical music. And it made it much easier for the intensive care nurses, to be able to nurse them. We also helped 2 other coroners, the North London and the Westminster coroner, and the City of London Police, in something called PMART, which basically stood for Pandemic Multi-Agency Response Teams. And these teams consisted of a doctor, a policeman, a fireman, and I can't remember who they were, but there were 4 of them in the car, and they would be dispatched with the help of the fannies to a home where somebody, as in a household home, not a care home, where somebody had died of COVID, because that body had to be treated in the right way so that it wasn't spread anywhere. The family had to isolate. They had to be issued death certificates. It was a very complicated system, and we gave a great deal of support to that too. And then finally this year, come the lockdown 2 or 3 or whatever it was in January, we supported back to the Nightingale. This time it was a very different hospital. It was no longer for unconscious people. This time it was like a rehabilitation step-down hospital, a cottage hospital, if you like. And this time our role was as befrienders. Nobody could have family in there. Many of these people had been on ventilators and unconscious and then were moved out to rehabilitate. And we would help them bring their families for the first time. We would help them find glasses which had gone missing. They had nothing but the hospital robe they were bought in. So we'd get them clothes. It was very worthwhile, really wonderful role for the families. And then we also deployed to the Royal London Hospital. I don't know if you remember on the news, but you kept seeing the Royal London Hospital, and they'd gone up from 37 critical care beds to 148 or something. And their staff were absolutely stretched to the limit. So we put in a team of administrators to help them action some of the minutes, the things they were getting from meetings. They hardly had time to read the minutes before the next shift. So we put people in there for 3 weeks. And we also helped another coroner, this time the London Inner South coroner in Southwark, because he had a number of staff down with COVID and they had very high numbers of deaths in that area. So we supported remotely, and this time we were more involved. We were using our call handling skills, and we were ringing family members, morgues, mortuaries, and doctors, trying to get bodies released through the system back to the families so they could have funerals. And I think in all, I think from 130 members, many of whom couldn't deploy because they were shielding themselves, we've given over 1,100 days of support, free support to London in the pandemic. And which I find remarkable, since everybody was working in their full-time day job. Many of them have to take leave to support. They don't get volunteer days. They were looking after households, and many were home educating children alongside it. So it's phenomenal. And since then, we've deployed 32 members of the Corps helped in the Military Joint Command headquarters for the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral. And now we're on a little bit of a calm, but we're now back to frantically fundraising as we do to try and keep the whole organisation going. We do have a really good website if anyone's interested in finding out a bit more about it. And literally, if you just put FANY into Google, don't put 2 N's in or you're likely to be arrested. But if you just put FANY, then it will come up and you can follow us on the news and see what we're all up to. And, you know, I'm happy to take questions. I don't know, Clive, how you do this, whether people put it in the chat or wave a hand. I'm in your hands.
Thank you.
I start by thanking you very much for your talk, and we have enough time to answer the questions. And at the end, I'm going to ask our treasurer if he will actually suggest that people make a donation. But first, I'd like to ask Clive if he would act as question master for those members that would like to ask questions, and I'm sure there will be many questions.
Yes,
Clive,
thank you. Thank you very much, President David. Just to remind everybody, if you wish to ask a question, can you please unmute yourself? That will then bring you to the top of the list that I have here on the right of my screen, or to raise your hand, you know, the blue hand that comes up. So I'm going to start with Rian Jones. You have a question, I believe.
Thank you very much, Clive. Philippa, that was a splendid introduction to the very valuable work of your organization. I have a rather technical question about the First World War history, if I may. When I was in practice as a lawyer, we used to look after something called the LAD Ladies Club, which was a splendid club for the Light Aid Detachment ladies who had gone as volunteer nurses to the front. What that now seems to be subsumed into the Red Cross. Have you come across any links between the Field Army Nursing Yeomanry and the LAD organization? And if so, why has it ended up in the Red Cross and not under your umbrella?
I've heard you here when you look through the First World War history, and I'm not an expert, but we do have them. So I might have to come back to you with a more detailed answer. But you do see that LAD were serving in some of the hospitals alongside. I think probably because they were nurses and we weren't. And I don't know, we wanted to be independent. You know, the lot that joined the SOE were called the Free Fanny. They didn't take kindly to being lumped in with anyone, really. So I don't know why. I think just probably it was the links with the horse. I mean, we do first aid, but we don't do any nursing, and we don't ride horses in the same way anymore. So it's a slight misnomer, and I'm not sure I'm really
I
the
suspect
exact answer.
I suspect the distinction is the nursing and the non-nursing, actually.
Yeah.
But they both worked side by side in the hospitals, and indeed right up to casualty clearing stations in the First World War.
Yes, definitely.
Which is why they received so many awards. But you do splendid work. Thank you very much for telling us more about it.
Thank you. Can I just say before I move on to Colleen Doyle that our visitors are also very welcome to ask questions if you wish to. Please don't feel reluctant. We'd be very pleased to hear from you. Colleen.
I'm sorry, I don't have a question. Sorry.
You were unmuted, and I thought you.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. Apologies.
Okay, no problem. I wonder if I could make a comment. I found the talk, Philippa, extremely interesting. Yes, I had heard of your organisation for years, but I always thought you were part of the British Army. I had no idea that you were a separate charity that has run this. Do you think perhaps you have not publicised enough the fact that you are an independent charity, because it would never have occurred to me before I've heard you today to make any charitable contribution towards you? As I say, I used to think you were part of the army.
Yes, it's really difficult. It's they do house us, so we are housed by the army, and we can claim travel and subsistence when we send members off on exercise with them. I don't know, there's a degree of surreptitiousness. You know, members can be members of the Special Forces Club, the HAC, they quite like it below, understated, quirky. We're very well supported by livery companies. We get some donations from other people in London. So I don't know, I'm so glad we're not tied to the army, because for the first thing is we'd have to take men. Now, there are lots of you lovely gentlemen there, and that's fine, but it is the very essence of the core. And I'm often challenged as to why we haven't taken men, normally by judges. If any of you judge, they really don't like it. But I believe this is great, that this is a chance to grow female leaders from all walks of life within an all-female, less competitive world. So there is nobody else to do the jobs of quartermaster, everything else, unless a woman steps up to do it. And you know, we are a diverse group of women. I know there are no men there, and I think that's our red line in the sand. So I think the First Aid Nursing Yeomanry, we're a membership organisation, so women, if they can afford it, pay a subscription, which enables us to stay all female. If we joined the military, A, we would have been disbanded. Think of all the lovely regiments you know that are no longer. And B, so we just wouldn't be there. We certainly couldn't remain all female. And if in years to come that becomes a huge problem, then I guess we'll call ourselves the Princess Royal Volunteer Corps and we'll take men. But I think it would be a very different organisation than it is. And it is rather unique and very special. So it's difficult. I mean, we do publish, you know, I work hard at networking within the City of London. I think people do know that we are a charity because they're incredibly supportive to us.
Thank you very much. President David.
If I could just ask effectively two questions, really. Do you exist for the benefit of your members or for your beneficiaries? Can you imagine, so this is the same question, can you imagine not being needed? And the other question was, could you perhaps give us a little bit more background on your funding requirement? How much help could we give you?
Thank you, President David. First of all, I think it's a balance of both. I think it is, most women come to join and it's incredibly hard to get in. We have 100 applicants. We don't advertise anywhere. People just arrive. And we have 100 applicants for 10, 15 places a year. And, you know, we had one wonderful girl from 2 Somali refugees who walked in and I said, how on earth do you find me here? And she said, oh, well, I was in an OTC at university, but I don't want to join the military. And I saw you marching in the Lord Mayor's show and thought, who are them? You know, I want to find out about them. So from that point of view, I think they come to us because they want to give back to the city they live and work in. But I think they stay with us because it develops them as people. So it's a balance of both. There have been times when we haven't had a role. So in fact, it was Odette Hallows who worked really hard, one of our Victoria Cross winners, George Cross winners, who worked incredibly hard at building the Casualty Bureau link. Other members have found the coroner link. Within the military, we've had to develop roles. So I think if we are able to be nimble enough to change with the times and stay relevant and offer something, we do have, you know, we have members of the press. So if you want advice as a military commander, there are people who can help. We have, within our 500, we speak 39 languages at the last count. So we have, if you need Russian speakers, we have Russian speakers. So I think it will stay there, I think. Sorry, I don't know if that's answered all of it. Have I missed a bit? Was there a bit? Oh, about funding.
Well, the other question, a little bit more about your funding, funding requirements.
The fundraising is, because we pay subscriptions, I think they pay £8 a month. If you can afford it, we get bursaries if we can find somebody who can't afford it. We have to fundraise about £200,000 a year. And some of that, very kindly, some the mercers and the cloth workers pay for one of our members of staff and give us a substantial amount, and smaller organisations make, livery companies make donations. And some of it is, for instance, we help the local authorities, London local authorities, and we're given a grant in lieu every year for that. But we do have to work hard. There's always a gap. And, you know, especially if events, we rely on somebody doing a marathon run or something, and that's a bit tricky. But at the moment, thankfully, last year, because we were doing so much in the public eye, you know, we managed to get by with our Just Donate button on Facebook, and, you know, we always manage, but it's always a challenge.
Thank you.
Yes, I don't see anybody else with their
Hi,
hand up.
Tim Moore. Can I make
Yes, of course you can.
Thank you very much for that, Philippa. I was impressed, as everybody would have been, by the fact that your organisation takes on so much. I hadn't realised it was so extensive. My question, I was going to ask you about recruiting, but you've mentioned that. But my second question is on devolution. We have a United Kingdom which has devolved administrations. Have you ever thought of expanding into the capital cities of the devolved nations, or is that just too much?
We have thought about it. We debate it at our sections meeting quite regularly, along with whether we need to change the name. And it becomes quite problematic because there isn't London in the other capital cities. There isn't the livery companies, there isn't the ceremonial stuff in the same way. So I think it would have to change, and it would need very careful leading. And I think it's a step too far, personally. I think we are better to stay as we are, a rather unique, special organisation out of sight of everyone. And if we are needed to expand, then we expand because the country needs us. You know, we're in talks with the National Cyber Unit, or whatever it's called. You know, we're always looking at new areas. And I think probably, having thought about it quite hard, I think it's better to keep it as it is in London and expand if the country needed us to do it.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, the other thing that is really quirky, which I should tell you about, is the rank. So because they're all officers, you only get a rank, a military rank, if you're in a role. So if you're the parachute officer, you might be a second lieutenant or whatever. If you're the quartermaster, you're a captain. When you get out of that role, you lose your rank. So it's very good for humility. So the rank is just tied to the role. People find that terribly difficult within the military when we support them. That last time they were talking to somebody, they had the rank of a lieutenant colonel, and now they have the rank of a lieutenant. You know, they can't work it out at all. And that's very unusual.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Don't see anybody with their hand up. So I hand back to you, President David.
Thank you very much indeed, Clive. I'd now like to, firstly, I will present the certificate to our speaker, which will be digitally communicated.
Thank you very much.
It's the recognition that the club really appreciated your contribution, which I hope you can see that it does. I'd now like to call on our treasurer, Hugh Kirk, for him take a particularly unusual role of calling for money. Over to you, Hugh.
I'm not sure about the unusual nature of it, really. I'm sure we've been all highly impressed, if not deeply impressed, with the talk given today by Commandant Philippa, and just how extensive and valuable their work has been. And I'm sure that we would want to respond to that very liberally by donating to their cause. So, and there's been quite an amazing talk indeed. I'm sure it has deeply impacted on all of us, and I hope it will equally do that to the liberality of our giving. So, on their behalf, may I ask you to be kind enough to make a donation to this corps, and this can be done in several ways. It can be done via donor box, and the link is in our President's newsletter. And please mark your donation FANY. And of course, as well, beyond that, you can make a donation by check payable to the Charity Trust of the Rotary Club of London and sent to me at my address, which I'm sure you all have. Alternatively, I'm sure you all have our Charity Trust bank reference. I'll say it slowly so that you can write it down. The sort code is 405240. 405240. The account number is 4 zeros and then 7103 00007103, and all you give, I'm sure, will be gratefully received by the Princess Royal Corps, and I'm sure the club itself will top up whatever you give. So I plead with you to give generously. Thank you so much.
There is a request, Hugh, to put, I don't know whether Janet could help with this, to put the charity bank number on chat so that members of viewing could access it now. Would it be possible to do that, Janet, to just put the bank details in?
Okay. Okay. I don't know how you do this anyway.
Janet, if you just read them out, I'll type it in for you. Yep.
Oh, thanks, Donna. Thanks, Colleen. Well, it's the account number is 0000.
So 4 zeros. Yep.
7103.
Yep. 7103.
And the sort code is 40.
40.
52.
Yep.
40.
405240. Yep.
Yeah, thanks.
What bank is that? Sorry, Reliance. Yeah.
No. That's the CAF Bank.
Say bank. Which one?
CAF Bank. CAF.
Charities Aid Foundation.
Charities Aid Foundation.
Okay. Yep. Thanks. Just so people know. Yeah, it should be in the chat now. Thank you. Thanks, Janet.
Thanks very much.
Colleen, it's CAF, not CAS.
Yeah, F for Freddie.
Yeah, CAF.
Charities Aid Foundation.
Yeah.
Right, so now we have all the information and nobody has any excuse. Let's see if we can do a little bit to help Fanny in their work. We never know as Londoners when we might need them, and I'm sure we.
I lost you.
You're frozen, David. Don't know if you can hear me, but we can't hear you.
No, thanks, Tom.
Clive, if David's gone.
Yes, you're going to do the vote of thanks.
Right, but David's back, I think.
Okay. Oh, he's back. Are you back with us, David? We can't hear you because you've muted yourself.
I'm sorry, I lose my signal every now and again. Thank you. I was going to call on Doug Wills to give the vote of thanks on behalf of the club. Over to you, Doug.
Thank you, David. That was an amazing talk. Absolutely staggering. And I was enthused. You started off by saying you were impassioned, and that's why you are so committed. That all came through. It was brilliant. The history lesson I've never heard before, and that was fantastic. Your involvement and Fanny's involvement in so many of the events, and I'm in news, I'm in media, and you read our news schedule out for 2017, 2018 and 2019, and these items were top of our news schedule and they were top of your action schedule. It's amazing, and the work that you do, I felt as a mere man very daunted by everything from parachute jumping to police call handling and dealing with some very traumatic situations. I must admit, I now am much wiser and fully in admiration. And I know everybody in the club will feel equally impressed by all that you've done yourself as commandant, and how much the members have done. And the fact that you're voluntary and not paid is remarkable, and a tribute to the collection of people in your team. So may I, on behalf of the club, thank you for enlightening us, impressing us, and entertaining us, and wish you well with the fundraising, which hopefully will follow. So may I ask the club to thank you in the traditional way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Doug, for that, and thank you, Philippa, for giving us a great luncheon, a virtual luncheon talk. I will now just move on to do my final announcement for the day, which is that next week's speaker will be Brigadier Andrew Jackson, who is the resident governor of the Tower of London and keeper of the Jewel House. He'll be talking about the Tower of London, living with history. And I'm certainly looking forward to hearing Brigadier Jackson talk about this latest role in his very impressive career. So thank you for your attention. I will now close the meeting. Clive, I don't know whether you'll keep it open, the Zoom open for a short while or not.
For a short
We
while.
do have a
we've got a council meeting at 12:30. I'll leave it open until 2 o'clock, David.
Okay. Thank you. So firstly, the toast, sorry. The final toast of the lunch is to Rotary and peace the world over. A particularly challenging toast every time I give it, but join with Rotary to give the toast, Rotary and peace the world over.
Rotary and peace the world over.
Thank you. I'll close the meeting.